Hello and welcome to the Boeing Company, a business analysis. This presentation is a full strategic look at the Boeing Company. Let's start with an introduction to Boeing. Boeing is an aerospace company that started in 1916. Started by William Boeing as the Pacific Aero Products Company, Boeing has since grown and developed into one of the world's largest aerospace and defense manufacturers. As we can see, some products include military aircraft, weapons, satellites, defense systems, communication systems, and commercial aircraft. Boeing has blossomed into one of the world's largest aerospace companies by creating a diverse workforce and developing two business units in space and security and commercial airplanes and defense. The key issues we will focus on today are the defense sector's declining demand and increased competition Boeing is facing in 2016. The critical issues we have identified for Boeing are constrained government budgets, expiring government contracts, and the fact that Boeing has most of its sales coming from the governmental sector. Before we get into these key issues, let's review Boeing's current situation. Boeing is the largest manufacturer of commercial airplanes, defense, and space and security systems in the world. Boeing effectively serves its clients in over 150 countries. As we can see, Boeing operates in three business segments. 1. Commercial airplanes. 2. Military aircraft and missiles. 3. Space and communications. As we can see, the prime contractor for NASA and the U.S. military is Boeing. As we've discussed, Boeing was founded by William Boeing in 1916 in Seattle, Washington. Boeing entered the defense industry by selling boat planes during World War I. It then entered the commercial airline industry in 1928 as an airmail service. Since then, Boeing has continued to produce fighters and bombers in World War II and to grab the U.S. market share in the defense aviation industry. The Boeing Corporation developed the first turbojet engine in 1958, giving Boeing a real competitive advantage. In 1960, Boeing purchased Vectral Corporation, entering the helicopter market. In 1996, Boeing purchased Rockwell International for $3.13 billion and created the 747 jumbo jet, giving Boeing a monopoly position in the defense industry. Let's now discuss Boeing's mission statement. As we can read, the mission of Boeing Aerospace Company is a combination of vision, values, and business imperatives that the company believes will help them maintain the Boeing tradition of innovation, imagination, and aspiration into the future. Now let's take a minute to interpret the mission statement. Boeing's mission statement does not meet our criteria of a perfect mission statement. While it addresses that they are in the aerospace business, it does not address who the customers are. Also, it does not address any stakeholders whatsoever. The Boeing mission statement is too general, but it does somewhat mention what the business should focus on, and we believe that is an excellent point to have in your mission statement. Let's now look at Boeing's strategies. Boeing has an integrated business level strategy. This is because Boeing has controlled its production costs and overhead tightly. While they have started to minimize their labor costs, they still produce differentiated products that possess different capabilities. This gives Boeing a mix of products. Boeing has an airplane to fit all needs. Boeing has a corporate level strategy of related diversification. In 2005, they had a revenue of $96 billion coming from their main two business segments. $66 billion came from the commercial airplane sales, and $30 billion came from the sum of defense, space, and security. Although $66 billion is close to 70% of Boeing's revenues, it has shared products, technologies, and distribution linkages between the firm's businesses. Boeing has a global, international level strategy because Boeing's products and services support customers in more than 150 countries. Boeing has 160,000 employees in over 65 countries. Boeing is actively pursuing a strategy for globalization and global value creation through new partnerships, joint ventures, mergers, and acquisitions. Boeing is constantly creating new supplier relationships and greatly expanding its international presence. Now we will be looking at the general environment. Let's start with macroeconomic factors. Macroeconomic factors support the growth of the airline industry. Like most industries, the airline industry is affected by economic cycles. The market has peaks and troughs. These fluctuations can especially be seen in the airline industries of developed countries. Since 2009, the average price of airline fares has increased 10.7%, compared to a 2.1% inflation rate. This shows that there's a lot of room to grow for Boeing. In this slide, we can see how the changing culture has affected Boeing. Boeing has taken real steps in reducing and recycling its environmental waste. Boeing is focusing on safer planes that cannot be sabotaged in light of 9/11. Boeing is also looking to the future. As we can see now, Boeing has installed Wi-Fi onto some of its planes and is catering to millennials who will be the customers of the future. Let's now talk about the global environment. As we can see, there's a huge aircraft industry boom in China, who imported $15.9 billion last year only in the aviation industry. Boeing is currently building an infrastructure in China and plans to manufacture there in the future. Though it may be hard for Boeing to localize production in China, because it's hard to develop relationships, get timely information, and gain access to the decision makers in China, because the industry is growing so quickly. Let's also look at Boeing's technological environment. Since the 1960s, airplanes have a 70% improvement in fuel economy. They have also reduced their carbon monoxide, as well as a 90% reduction in noise footprint. Boeing has also improved the range on their planes and the carrying capacity of their aircraft. Boeing has revolutionized the industry since the 1970s. Let's now look at the political and legal environment for Boeing. We can see the aircraft industry is densely regulated and very restricted. Deregulation of European airlines holds the promise of an expanded market for smaller jets, and that gives Boeing an opportunity to compete in that market. There are several factors that are now affecting the demographics of the Boeing customer. The baby boomers are changing to millennials, and that's a problem for Boeing. They have different needs and they're filled in different ways. To provide millennials with innovation, there is now Wi-Fi on planes. To accommodate the style that baby boomers are used to, planes are now larger and are more geared to customer service to accommodate that. In these years, there's a high demand for air transport, and that means Boeing needs an improved fuel efficiency if they're not going to spend too much. Sustainable biofuels are what Boeing is invested in, and they're expected to reduce the airline emissions by 80%. With the increased demand for aviation and the rise in fuel prices, the industry has taken steps to decrease carbon emissions by investing in alternate sustainable jet fuels and also improving the standard fuels for new aircraft. Let's now take a look at the industry environment through Porter's 5 forces. Let's start with the threat of new entrants. 4 companies in the airline industry are producing 60% of its products. There's a competitive nature in the industry, and this industry requires a ton of startup capital. This industry is also hampered by regulation and government policies, so it's difficult for many to enter the industry. This industry also takes a lot of advanced technology, and the know-how to enter this industry is extreme. So, the threat of new entrants is low. Now, let's look at the bargaining power of suppliers. There's been a recent consolidation of suppliers, so it's a very competitive market. There's low switching costs, so again, it's very, very competitive and very easy for people to switch suppliers, so the bargaining power of suppliers is very low. Let's also look at the threat of substitute products. As we've stated previously, entering the market is very difficult, so there's high switching costs and low quality substitutes out there. If they are looking for good substitutes, there's a high price on these substitutes, and the threat of substitutes is therefore low because someone would have to have superior technology, which is very difficult to do in the aircraft industry. Let's now look at the rivalry among firms in this industry. As stated previously, there's a consolidated market. There's high fixed costs to developing an airplane and to manufacturing it, and it's a red ocean because it's very, very difficult to enter this industry. It requires a lot of capital. In the space industry, there's SpaceX, but that is a small company and has a lot of venture capitalists behind it, which means there will not be a lot of new entrants in the industry without their funding, which is already tied up. So Boeing really doesn't have to worry about competition on a government level, and the private level is very, very small. There's intense competition within the airline industry, so there is a high threat of being replaced by an Airbus plane or a Mitsubishi plane if you're in the Asian region. But in the United States, Boeing is the main player. So while Boeing is well situated, the threat of being replaced is high right now in the airline industry, but in other industries such as defense and space, the threat of rivalry is lower, but it is getting higher because the private industry is playing a role. This slide shows the competition Boeing is facing. We can see the Northrop Group, Airbus, and Lockheed Martin competing on the aviation side and in the space side. While Boeing has had a strategic alliance with Lockheed Martin, who knows going into the future what it'll look like. Let's specifically focus on Airbus for Boeing's airline competitions. Airbus started in 1967 and started its sale in 1970. It's headquartered in France and it is leading the world in jetliners and aircrafts. So this means that they do more continental international flights than Boeing does. So if you're going from the United States, crossing an ocean, and going to Europe, chances are you will be on an Airbus. It's the more preferred airline for trans-ocean flight. Aerospace and defense, Boeing is much larger than Airbus and doesn't currently have to worry so much. But Airbus can have a foothold in Europe because they are based there and sort of understand the governments better than the United States-based Boeing. So as we can see, competition exists and Boeing is no longer the main company in the market. It has a few competitors. But looking at internal analysis, we can see the good things about Boeing right now and going into the future. Let's start by looking at Boeing's revenues. As we can see, the revenues of Boeing have been on the rise compared to Lockheed Martin, which has stagnated and gone slightly down, and Northrop, who is now declining in the market. As we can see, Boeing is at the top of the market and makes just under $100 billion in revenue. As stated previously, Boeing's revenue is currently $96 billion with a B dollars. As we know, revenue doesn't take into account expenses. What does is net income. Let's take a look at Boeing's net income. As we can see, Boeing's net income currently leads the market, but has decreased since 2014. As mentioned previously, Airbus is a rapidly growing competitor and is the fastest growing competitor in our market. So Boeing and Airbus will be competing in the future over commercial airliners, and we must take this into account and remain competitive in that industry. Here we can see Boeing's costs of goods sold, and we can see it is leading the market and increasing. Airbus is increasing, but less than Boeing in this category, which is good for Boeing, and it shows that Boeing is moving more product than Airbus. Now let's take a look at the value chain analysis of Boeing. For our primary activities, we can see marketing and sales, logistics, operations, and the uniquely situated Boeing Capital. For our support activities, we can see infrastructure, human resources, IT systems, and research and development. All of these help develop margin for Boeing, which helps the company be more profitable. Let's look at Boeing's board of directors. As we can see, Boeing has a few venture capitalists as well as a former White House chief of staff working in its board of directors. Obviously, competing in the airline industry takes a lot of capital, so venture capitalists are needed for these pursuits. Also, a CEO of a consulting group helps in Washington, and also he's a Washington insider. He's been in the White House, he's worked as the White House chief of staff, and he's ready to strategically position Boeing for defense contracts with the government. Here we can see a diversified group on the board of directors. We can see Boeing's current CEO and another airline executive for Continental Airlines. These are Boeing's two insiders on their board of directors, and they really understand Boeing as a company and where it sits within the airline industry. On this slide, we can also see an insurance head, Edward M. Liddy, works as the Chief Executive Officer of Allstate, and he is instrumental in Boeing Capital and positioning Boeing in a way that can insure its planes further. We can also see Boeing's focus on energy innovation by having a CEO of Duke Energy on our board of directors, as well as a professor of public policy in order to help with the Washington government side of the business again. As we can see, Boeing has 83% outsiders sitting on its board of directors. That's 2 insiders with 10 outsiders. As we can see, Boeing is looking outside of its company in search of future solutions. Boeing is forward-thinking in this way, and by utilizing such a large field of people coming from a diverse set of places, Boeing can really be on the forefront of innovation and communication with all of those directors' fields. Let's view Boeing's operations. So Boeing is uniquely situated to provide research and development into its space program, its aircraft program, its military aircraft program, and for developing long-range missiles. By having this research and development program as a support system, we can really see the products of it in the operations. And by Boeing having such an immense and such a qualified research and development system, we can see the best products in all of these categories in its operations. We can also look at Boeing Capital, which monitors modifications, upgrades, and provides engineering support for those who have bought a Boeing plane, whether it be private or governmental. We can also look at the logistics of Boeing and see that through communication, Boeing has a much stronger corporation than other competitors. Boeing can use its technology in one place, communicate it directly to another place, and really deliver better products because of this innovation and cross-product support. Let's now look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that Boeing has. Let's start with strengths. Boeing is the second largest defense contractor in the United States, and the United States has the first largest military budget in the world. This puts Boeing at a competitive advantage because it is connected to the largest military spending country in the world. Boeing also has a wide variety of commercial airliners and provides many of these airliners to many aircraft companies. So United flies Boeing planes, Southwest flies Boeing planes, American Airlines flies Boeing planes. Boeing is uniquely situated for airliners to buy their products. In addition to the US, Boeing maintains a strong relationship with other markets, and this can be seen through China and Boeing making inroads in China and setting up to put its manufacturing there. As stated previously, China has invested $15 billion into the aircraft industry, and Boeing is at the forefront of capturing that market. As we can see, Boeing is financially stable and appealing to investors, shareholders, and venture capitalists alike. If you would like to develop an airliner or a defense airplane or even a long-range weapon, Boeing has developed these and is ready to develop more into the future. Some weaknesses Boeing has is that it depends on the Dreamliner right now as a cash cow, and because of this and the market changing to include smaller aircraft, Boeing may have to switch away from this core competency and develop other planes. Boeing may be overspending in the research and development department. It has a lack of diversification heading into the new markets. And since products are not cheap, it decreases the amount of places that Boeing can find new markets. That being said, there are some opportunities that go along with these threats. The Dreamliner is proven to be an excellent plane and could be beneficial in these new markets. International markets are growing consistently, and Boeing has the best products for airliners of their size. There has been an increase in international terrorist attacks, and Boeing is at the forefront of addressing these concerns. Boeing also has strong technology innovation, which means if you need a product, you can go to Boeing, and Boeing can produce that product to your specifications. Also, there's a rising demand for defense products, and Boeing is at the forefront of this industry. Along with those strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities come threats. There is stiff competition from domestic weapons sellers and international airliners. We can see defense cuts happening in the future, and this could mean trouble for Boeing. That being said, with $96 billion in revenue, Boeing is keen on innovating and is looking forward to the future to innovate the markets it already has a great stake in. In conclusion, let's look at our recommendations for Boeing and focus on one key one. We would recommend recommendation 3, invest in China. As stated previously, China has $15 billion to invest in foreign aircraft services. Boeing is a great place to get these services, and we feel that they should position themselves to be extremely effective in China. Thank you for watching our strategic analysis of Boeing.